Hey, what's going on? It's Matt Polis, and it's time for another episode of MeatSauce for Tuesday, March the 9th, 2021. This is episode number 21. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. I want to just first off here say that at one point yesterday, it was 66 degrees outside here in southeast Michigan. Yeah, you heard that right. It felt so good. Spring is upon us. And I love winter. You know, I really enjoy winter, but man, it's just when the seasons start to change, it just always feels so good. I hope the last week has treated you well. I went down to Dayton to visit my family for a few days over the weekend, and it's always good when I'm able to visit for a few days. I basically, when I when I go home for a visit, I basically have set meals and food that I need to eat every time I go home. You know, it's usually Skyline Chili or Marion's Pizza. Although we didn't get Marion's Pizza this time, it's okay. We still did get pizza, and it was good. And then there's this Korean-style Chipotle called kebab. Oh my God. Kebab is so good. My mouth is like salivating just thinking about it. You know, it's 10 in the morning right now. So if you're listening to this in the Dayton area, you have to go try kebab. It's fantastic. It's in the shopping center on the corner of Dorothy Lane and Woodman Drive, right next to Great Clips and Subway. So you'll thank me later. I did do... As if this is some sort of shock, I did do some bourbon hunting on my trip. I stopped at a few liquor stores on the way down from Michigan to Ohio. Something about Ohio, though, that I don't know if I've talked about it on here or not, but Ohio is a controlled liquor state, meaning that somebody at the top of state government, or however that works, I'm not sure who that person is, picks what liquor the state is going to get each year, and then it's distributed amongst the liquor stores across the state. You know, whereas here in Michigan, we are not a controlled state, so the liquor stores themselves basically get their product. You know, so we have stores up here that do a lot of like what they call store picks. So like the distillery will send them samples of different barrels that they've picked out, and then you know, the liquor stores will then try each barrel and decide which one they want for their store, and then bottles of that specific one that they tried will be sent to their liquor store to be sold to their customers. So store picks are always a little bit different than like what the mainstream is of that product. It's a little off profile. So Ohio is a controlled liquor state, and they may still do store picks. I don't really know for sure. I got to fix my microphone here real quick. I don't really know for sure if they do store picks. But anyways, so somebody picks the liquor that the whole state is going to get each year, and then it's distributed amongst, you know, all the liquor stores across the state. So there's definitely, you know, a positive and a negative to this. You know, the negative is that there really isn't much in the way of variety across the state, you know, because everyone's getting the same stuff. So it makes bourbon hunting kind of non-existent, you know, in Ohio, especially because, you know, there's people who essentially chase down delivery trucks and grab any sort of what would be hard to find bottles before they really even hit the shelves. Like most liquor stores are sold out of that stuff before they even unpack it. So the one positive, though, about Ohio being a controlled state is that every bottle has to be sold at their MSRP value, you know, so meaning a liquor store can't jack up the prices on a certain bottle because it might be more popular or it's selling really well, so they jack up the price on it a little bit. So, which is nice, you know, because Michigan definitely has some liquor stores that do that, and they, you know, bottles tend to be more expensive in certain areas versus other areas in the state. So, Ohio does have a liquor lottery, which I'm not sure if that is done, you know, multiple times a year or if it's just at the end of the year, but you are able to sign up for the lottery, and then if you win, you get the chance to buy, I don't know if it's a specific bottle or you get like a selection and you pick one that you want to buy. So that's kind of cool. That's like your way of getting a potentially highly, allocated bottle that's going to just be impossible to find on the shelf otherwise. So we did go to Kentucky for a night to do a little shopping, and man, there's nothing like buying bourbon in Kentucky just because there's just so many places and they all have a wide variety of stuff that, you really can't find, at least, where I live now and where I'm from. So it's like one of those things, it just feels so different, and it's really nice. But it's crazy, to think, we were just in Newport, Kentucky, which is literally across the river. Like Cincinnati's like right there. So to see the difference in bourbon selection just across a bridge is pretty wild. It's crazy how the states differ so much. Now that I have talked your ear off about whiskey, it's time for another edition of What's on the Shelf. I have a bit of a different bottle to share with you this time around. Today we're taking a look at the High West Distillery out of Park City, Utah, and their High West Double Rye blended whiskey. High West Distillery was founded in 2006 by David Perkins and was the first legally licensed distillery in Utah since the end of Prohibition. They began distilling in 2007 using just a small 250-gallon still. Like most young distilleries, High West sourced a lot of their whiskey from Midwest Grain Products, or more famously known as MGP, out of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Distilleries typically source their whiskey while their own distillate is aging, and it allows them to push out some product and make some money to cover their costs on those early years of being a distillery. So from what I've read, and this was not known about High West until an article came out in 2014 about how they were using MGP as their whiskey source. So today's version of the High West Distillery still has some sourced MGP, but they're beginning to use a lot more of their own distillate because it has come of age and it's ready to use. Their product line includes the Double Rye, which we were talking about today, the Rendezvous Rye, the Burr Rye, Campfire, American Prairie Bourbon, and a Midwinter Night's Dram. The American Prairie, I believe, is the only true bourbon that they actually sell, so they are much more involved in the rye whiskey side of things. The Double Rye is a blend of straight rye whiskeys and has an age statement of 2 years. So basically they're saying that the youngest whiskey in that bottle is at least 2 years old. So if you ever see an age statement on a bottle, that is letting you know that the youngest possible whiskey in the bottle is what is stated on the label. So there may be stuff that's older than that, but the youngest, it can't be any younger than what it says. So this one in this case is 2 years. The Double Rye is said to be a blend of rye whiskeys ranging from 2 to 7 years in age. This bottle gets their name because it uses two different high rye mash bills that are then blended together. So blending is becoming a really big thing in the whiskey world, where you're taking all these different aged whiskeys and starting to all blend them together and make unique combinations of what those are, as opposed to a single barrel where that whiskey comes out of just one barrel and that's it. Now they're taking from multiple barrels, multiple ages, and blending them together to create, new, unique flavor profiles. So the first mash bill is said to be from MGP, and it's 95% rye and 5% barley. And then the second mash bill is said to be from the High West Distillery's own distillate and is 80% rye and 20% malted rye. So basically you have here 100% rye in this bottle. Also known as kind of like a 95.5. So the Double Rye comes in at 92 proof or 46% alcohol by volume and retails for anywhere between $35 and $40. I believe I got mine for about $38 at Meijer. Some nosing notes I got on this one include some light hay, a pine tree note, and some really nice mint. I haven't really gotten mint on a bottle before, so it was really cool to kind of start to smell and understand. It was kind of like a spearmint, kind of a more earthy mint. And just a touch of rye spice, which is really nice. The rye spice was really gentle when I first opened the bottle, and it allowed really for all the other notes to take on a more prominent role in the whiskey. On the palate, I definitely got a little more of the rye spice, along with that continued mint and a hint of pine. The hay certainly stayed there as well, and overall, it had a really nice earthy taste to it, in my opinion. And when I was really into IPAs, I would love the IPAs that kind of had that earthy pine taste to them. It almost tasted, like the woods in that sense. And I really, that's a little bit nostalgic for me, so I really enjoy what this High West product, offers. You can definitely get some of the youth from the whiskey, as it does, to me it tastes rather thin. I don't know if that's the right verbiage to use for that, but anytime I'm drinking a bourbon or a whiskey and I have a sip and it doesn't feel like it coats my whole mouth, or it doesn't, it feels like water, it almost to me is like thin. So it does taste a little thin on the palate, and but fortunately for me, the lower 92 proof allows it to be a really nice sipper. So some young whiskeys have a much higher proof, and it ends up being all you can taste is the alcohol, and it just burns. It's high alcohol, young whiskey, and it's just a little aggressive. So this High West Double Rye is definitely an easy-going, different type of rye whiskey, with the blends of those two different mash bills. So one other thing I noticed with this bottle is that it's gotten a lot better the second or third time that I went to have a pour of it. So as air has gotten in the bottle, it's allowed the whiskey to open up a bit, not be as harsh on the alcohol tasting notes, and this is the case for just about any bourbon or whiskey you're drinking. So if you've got a bottle and you open it for the first time and you really aren't a fan, or it drinks a little too hot, give it maybe a week or so to open up, and then revisit the bottle and see if your opinion has changed. And I also, they refer to like the very first pour as kind of like the neck pour of the bottle, and then they also talk about the shoulder. And a lot of people, from what I've gathered, is once you get kind of through the neck and past the shoulder of the bottle, that's where the air and all of that really starts to open up the bourbon or the whiskey, and it allows it to really take on more of the prominent like nosing and tasting notes that you want, as opposed to such a strong burn from the ethanol. So I really recommend the High West Double Rye as a good intro to this kind of blended rye whiskey, and it seems to be pretty readily available. Like I said, I bought this at my local Meijer, so it's definitely out there. I really want to try their Rendezvous Rye, which is basically like the big brother of this Double Rye. And then hopefully, someday snagging a bottle of that a midwinter's night dram, because that's like the next step up from the Rendezvous as well. So can't recommend the High West enough. It's a good bottle to try out, especially if you want to get into rye whiskey. This kind of gives you a unique flavor profile that really is different from some other ryes that I have tried so far. So I do really enjoy coming to this one. This one also seems like a very good spring summer outdoor sipper. If you're somebody who doesn't want to drink whiskey neat, you could totally throw an ice cube in this and just kind of slowly sip on it, all night long. I think it's a really, really good bottle for that. And it kind of has this like old Western bottle, and it like the label is kind of an old Western theme, and the bottle has the High West Distillery logo and everything embossed on the glass, and it's a really thick feeling glass. And I'm also just obsessed with bottles that kind of look like wine bottles, like tall, skinny, slender bottles. I can't stop looking at them. It's a problem for me. But anyway, so the High West Double Rye out of Park City, Utah. Check it out. I really, really enjoy it. All right, that's it for this week's edition of What's on the Shelf. Let's move on to some sports from the past week. I saw a couple leaks on Twitter over the past weekend of potential uniforms for the Browns and the Bengals. So the Browns, of course, got new uniforms for the 2020 season, but they are said to be wearing an anniversary-style uniform at some point during the 2021 season. So I'll be honest, I'm sure it is a throwback of some sort, but if the picture I saw is accurate, I don't really like it. It's like all white with the big block number, on the front of the jersey, and like the shaded part of where the blocked part of the number is like a bright orange, and then the actual number itself is brown. So it almost looks like a highlighter orange. It's just a little much. So again, I don't know if that is gonna be the actual one, but it seems like it's heading that way. There is a logo though of a football, with the 1946 inside of it on the left side of the chest. I do really like that. If you've seen the Browns use that logo before, 1946 is obviously when the Browns were founded, and so this is their 75th anniversary of being a franchise. So the football part of it is cool on the left chest there. And then the Bengals also had a possible New Jersey leak. So it looks like 3 different color combinations were leaked, and I'll be honest, I actually really like what the Bengals might be doing there with their jerseys. They're very simple but effective. So they use the stripes, if you can imagine the stripes of the helmet, they use that and then put those on the top of each shoulder, and then the rest of the jersey is just like one solid color. I saw black with orange stripes, white with black stripes, and I can't remember the last one. But anyways, they just have a solid color, and then with like the Bengal stripes on the tops of the shoulders. So it also then says Bengals above the number that's on the chest. So I do have to say this first. I can't stand the Bengals, but I do like these potential jerseys for them. Very simplistic but effective, and using the helmet, because I think the helmet's really cool. So using the helmet to kind of add that into the actual jersey itself is neat. I haven't seen the pants. I don't know what the pants will be. Very basic too, and similar but effective. So we'll have to see. Again, these are all just leaks, so it's not a guarantee. But it kind of, everyone was taking it pretty seriously. So a little bit of Browns news here. It looks like cornerback Grady Williams has been cleared to play football again by his doctor. Which is amazing. He was out all of the 2020 season with some sort of nerve damage in his neck or shoulder, somewhere in that area. I think it was his neck. So that would be great for him, obviously, to get back out on the field. He's only been in the league now 2 years, but only played 1. So, hopefully he's able to get back into the swing of things, fairly quickly, and be able to kind of pick up, where he left off. He wasn't great in his first year, but I think he can, definitely be out there, Then there's a ton of rumors swirling around about what the Browns are going to start doing when the new league season starts next Wednesday, March the 17th. Whether or not they're going to trade OBJ or trade David Njoku. It looks like tight end Kyle Rudolph was either released or is not going to re-sign with the Vikings and is said to want to play for Kevin Stefanski again. So that could be pretty interesting. It might affect, David Njoku's future. I wouldn't mind, honestly, Kyle Rudolph in a Browns uniform at all. You need plenty of tight ends for the way that Stefanski runs his offense, and Rudolph's a proven vet and obviously played for Stefanski in Minnesota. So then there's also some rumors that cornerback Marshawn Lattimore could be coming to Cleveland, which would be awesome. I would love to see that. Former Buckeye, but only time will tell. I'm sure more will come out between now and next week's episode. So I will definitely have more to talk about on that front with free agency and trades, etc. All I know is the Browns definitely, like I've said before, have to shore up the defense in free agency, trades, or in the draft, kind of all of it. And I think they're going to. I think they know what they're doing, and they really have my complete trust. So pretty awesome place to be. One last thing here on the NFL front. I received my first review on Apple Podcasts, and it was from a gentleman named Jim West. Now, real quick here, when I saw this review, I immediately chuckled to myself because Jim West was a name that was an inside joke back in high school. So I don't know if this is someone I went to high school with that's listening to the podcast, or if this is actually someone named Jim West. So Jim, if this is really you, thanks for listening to the podcast. And if this is someone pretending to be Jim West, well, thanks for listening to the podcast. It was so funny to me. I was like, wait a second. This is first review, and it's from a guy named Jim West. So Jim, if you're listening to this and you're a real person, just know I really, really appreciate it. Let's see. Jim wrote, thanks for the whiskey tips. Love your insights. I'm curious as to how you think the AFC North landscape will look next season. Well, Jim, thanks for the kind review. I think going into the 2021 season, we have to look at the Browns as potentially being the favorites to win the division. I know you've got the Ravens right there, and no one really knows what the Steelers will be like, with Big Ben coming back, taking less money. But just the momentum of the Browns, coming off of last season, I think they have to be kind of the favorites. They're returning just about every offensive person that they had last year. And they're shoring up their offensive line. They've signed several guys as backups that were with them last year. And, that those front five guys are legit starters and probably the best offensive line in the National Football League. And then you combine that with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb and the play action of Baker Mayfield. And I think they just have to be the favorites right now. That's before free agency, before trades, before the draft, etc. But I do think the Bengals could be a surprise team this year, especially if Joe Burrow comes back and is healthy, and especially if they spend money in free agency. They have to go get Burrow some help on the offensive line. I know Joe Thuney has been a big eyeball for potentially signing back home with the Bengals, and if they do that and then draft well, they might take that Penei Sewell from Oregon. I'm probably saying his name wrong, but everyone I listen to about the Bengals, so high on him. So I think if they do all those things, they draft well, they shore up the offensive line, whether it's drafting or free agency, I could see the Bengals surprising a lot of people, So either way, I think it will be still, again, one of the toughest divisions in the NFL. It was last year. You had 3 teams from that division in the playoffs, and I think it's going to be even tougher next year. So, because the Ravens are always going to be there competing for the title, and the Browns are in a tough spot in the sense that they have to prove that they can be even better than last year, and it's always tough for a team to kind of break through that wall. You can have an amazing season, but to have back-to-back amazing seasons and then 3 in a row, 4 in a row, I mean, that's a tough thing to do, and that's something where the Steelers and the Ravens have been able to be so good, so it's like you can't count them out, And then the real question mark for me with the Steelers is, who are they going to be? Because I don't think Big Ben has enough gas, left in the tank. Even though they started 11-0 last year, they just completely collapsed, And again, if the Bengals spend money on the O-line, they could be right there too. So it's going to be really, really fun. The Steelers' defense is always great, but then I know they have I think Bud Dupree is a free agent, so who knows if he's going to re-sign with them or what's going to happen. So I think it's going to be a really fun division, really tough division, and all 4 teams are going to be pretty good. So thanks again for the review. I hope my answer helped. I'm sure, again, as the offseason starts to take more shape and we get into the summer, those answers will probably continue to evolve as we get closer to the start of the season. So let's see, moving on to some Reds updates. We are officially over a full week into spring training thus far. Here are my 3 main takeaways so far from Reds camp. And I'm going to say the 3 of them and then elaborate on each one afterwards. So, number 1, the young arms across the board within the organization is spectacular. Really, really good. Number 2, Tyler Stevenson, I think, needs to shore up his defense, and then he needs to be the everyday starting catcher. And then number 3, D. Strange Gordon better make the MLB roster. So, number 1, the amount of strong arms that the Reds have battling for spots, either in the rotation or in the bullpen is really exciting and honestly surprising. When Trevor Bauer left and we traded Raisel Iglesias and, the landscape of our pitching rotation and bullpen just seemed very different than what we had last year, and I really didn't think this organization had that many guys, but watching within the first week, every guy they have throws so hard, with maybe the exception being Sean Doolittle, but he's at least a proven veteran who's won a World Series, etc. Hunter Green is easily throwing 103. And when I say easily throwing 103 miles per hour, he looks like he's doing it with no effort, which is insane. And then you have Nick Lodolo, who looks really polished, and I'm calling it now. I bet he starts the year out at AAA. If he continues what he's doing in the spring so far, if he continues to get better and is as dominant as he's been, I think you see him starting at AAA this season, and then potentially, depending on where the Reds are at, you could see him as a September call-up, and then potentially starting in the major league rotation, as early as next season. He looks really, really good, and there are several other names that I'm sure I'm missing. I know TJ Antone has been a monster so far this spring training. His velocity is up. His breaking stuff is nasty as heck. He pitched yesterday, and seeing some of the highlights, it's unreal. So really looking forward to TJ Antone as well. And this is only his second year. He was a rookie last year. And pitching coach Derek Johnson said that this is overall the most talented group of guys he has had since he's been in Cincinnati, which is awesome to hear him say that. It's easy to look at last year's starting rotation and question how he can say that, but it's easy to forget just how bad the bullpen was at the beginning of the 2020 season. Like, they were horrendous. We lost so many games because of them, and it really looks like they have a group of guys that could come in at this point in the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th inning and just shut it down, and that's a really great place to be. The velocity that a lot of these guys have, I mean, there's not too many of them throwing slower than 95, especially coming out of that bullpen. So that's pretty awesome, and it's just really excited for the pitching, even though they're going to give up runs right now in spring training because they're still working through some stuff, they're not in midseason form yet, there's still a ton to be excited about. So definitely more on this as we get closer to opening day. And then number 2, so the Tyler Stevenson thing, he's clearly offensively ready to play in the majors. He is clearly better than Tucker Barnhart, even within the small sample size that we have of Tyler. But, his defense and game calling still needs to be refined, and that's only going to come, though, with more game time experience. So I question, if offensively he is that much better than Barnhart, which I believe he is, and the offense is the thing that is struggling for the Reds in 2021, which it's possible to be, do you give up a little bit on the defensive side / game calling side to get more at bats for Stevenson, especially not having the DH this season? I think it's something they might have to look at if Tucker is really struggling offensively at the plate this season. So either way, I'm excited for Stevenson to one day be kind of that everyday guy. And that's not to discredit Tucker Barnhart. He's a fantastic defensive catcher. He just offensively has never been able to be as consistent as you want from a guy who's playing every day. So I know they're probably going to platoon that position for the majority of the year, similar to what Barnhart and Kurt Casale did the last couple of years. So Stevenson will get more playing time, but I just wonder at what point do we look at him as the number 1 catcher and not Tucker Barnhart. So, and then D. Strange Gordon, in the little bit that I've watched thus far, he needs to be on the major league roster. He may not be a guy you play every day. He may not be a guy who gets on base all the time, but he's a guy that gives you a chance to get on base every at bat, and the one thing the Reds don't really have and haven't really had since Billy Hamilton is speed on the base paths. This has to be one of the periods in Reds history where they have the slowest team in the last 30 years. You look at the guys on the roster and there's just not a ton of speed, and to their credit, speed has kind of gone out of the game a little bit, so it's been more about the home run ball. but you still have to be able to utilize that part of the game because it does come into play at some point, So, and Gordon at least gives you some options with pinch running and can give you some decent defense if you need that. And you have to remember, like just a few years ago, he had over 200 hits. He won the batting title. He was, ridiculous, like not long ago. So he's not up there in age. I know he's in his 30s, but just seeing him run the bases and sprint to first, I see him being a nice utility to come off the bench and help in any way possible, and he's that veteran guy who's played for a while. And I just think it would be silly for him not to be on the Major League roster, on opening day. I think he will be, and I hope he will be. But, all right, I think that's all I have on the Reds this week. I'm sure I will have more next week as we continue moving through spring training. Opening day is getting here, April the 1st against the St. Louis Cardinals. I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.